Hi, everyone. Oh, welcome to week 5, and we're going to be discussing learning in this chapter. How do you learn? How would you, if you were in my classroom face to face, I would ask you, how would you define learning? What would you write down? Is it learning if you don't remember it 2 weeks from now? Is it learning if you have to rehearse quite a bit? How do we define learning? And we think in terms of learning, I like to think a definition that is given often is it's a systematic and relatively permanent change in our behavior, okay, that occurs through experience. So we would think that in order for it to be learning, it has to be at least relatively permanent. Excuse me. But there are different types of learning. We talked about classical conditioning, okay? We talk about operant conditioning. We talk about observational learning. We don't have to go through all kinds of experience to learn something. We can observe someone going through a situation and we can learn from what they went through. That is considered by Bandura observational learning. All of us learn in different ways, but I think of applications in life. For example, classical conditioning in humans. Have you ever gone to a restaurant or at home and you ate something and you associated being seriously sick with that food, causing a food aversion that you don't have to have the same experience 2 or 3 times? The first time you learned it, you paired that food with being sick, you made that connection, you learned, and you don't ever want to eat that again. If I were to ask you, what are some things that has caused food aversion in your life? That is a type of learning. All you needed was one pairing experience, and you made that learning, which is relatively permanent. So an example of classical conditioning in our lives. And then we think about the famous case of little Albert and how he learned to pair fuzzy animals with fear. And sometimes that pairing can cause panic attacks or phobias later on in life, and we never really made that connection. So again, very interesting subject for you to try to learn and put into practice. I'm hoping that no matter your area of studies, that you're putting into practice the things that we're studying in this class. And then in terms of other type of learning and unlearning, when we talk about systematic desensitization, that means we try to unlearn a learned behavior in terms of fear. Again, very interesting subject. Operant conditioning, in a very simplistic way, is when you learn by either being rewarded for doing something or being punished for doing something. And so we often can change our own behavior or someone else's behavior, perhaps a child, by giving them rewards or punishing them, removing something that can cause a certain behavior. And so we have classical conditioning, we have operant conditioning, we have observational learning. Make sure you understand the difference between punishment and reinforcers, what diminishes one behavior and what increases a desired behavior. Make sure that's clear for you. And then when we think in terms of theorists, we have Thorndike and Pavlov and Skinner, and then of course Bandura, who wrote a lot about the theories of learning, others as well, but in this class and what we're talking about, and the typical ways that human beings change, according to Bandura, for example, would be through observational learning. And then we would have to really attention and then retention, and then we have to actually reproduce the movement. And so there are just different ways. The Bobo doll experiment is something that you want to check if you're not familiar with it, okay? And so who are the models in our lives or in children, because they are prone to imitate them? Who are those models? So think about that as well. And then towards the end of the chapter, we want to make sure we know even how our brain learns, okay, and how sleep affects our learning, and the two types of mindset. Some people say, you know what, I'm never going to be good in math, and I don't even bother trying. That is an example of a fixed mindset, thinking that my ability cannot change, versus a growth mindset where you think, you know what, I have a hard time with math, but if I get a tutor, if I watch things on movies on YouTube, and if I uh, find someone to help me, I can learn, I can grow, my ability can change. That is considered a growth mindset. Carol Dweck wrote about that, and it's a very interesting concept. Where in our lives do we have a fixed mindset, and where do we have a growth mindset? How does culture influence our learning? Okay, and so those are aspects that I want to make sure that you're familiar with this week. And also, I want to make sure that you are mindful that we also have a discussion board this week. Again, I want you to continue planning for the written assignment. You want to make sure you're familiar with it and that you are doing quite well. Again, let me see if there's anything else here. Of course, you always have your study quiz. And again, wishing you a great week.